Good evening, this is Helen Mirren saying, welcome to the Graham Norton Show.
A scheduled promotional appearance on British television just turned into a massive royal scandal. Dame Helen Mirren sat on the famous red sofa of the Graham Norton Show and delivered a blistering, live takedown directed straight at Prince Harry. The studio audience went completely silent. The host was visibly stunned, and the unfiltered footage is currently sending shockwaves from Hollywood to Buckingham Palace. The world's most iconic actress just said exactly what the royal family never could. The moment the red sofa went completely silent, the studio lights at the BBC television center cast a bright glow over the famous curved red sofa. Dame Helen Mirren sat on the right side of the couch, wearing a sharp velvet blazer and holding a glass of water. To her left sat a prominent American comedian and a pop star, both laughing at a joke the host had made just moments earlier. It was a standard Thursday evening taping for the Graham Norton Show. The production crew expected a routine promotional segment about Mirren's latest historical feature film. Graham Norton leaned forward, resting his forearms on his desk. He glanced down at his blue cue cards before looking up at Mirren. He asked her about the enduring legacy of British nobility, referencing her famous award-winning portrayals of monarchs on the screen. The studio audience chuckled, expecting a light-hearted anecdote about wearing heavy velvet costumes or navigating royal etiquette. Mirren did not smile. She adjusted her posture, uncrossed her legs, and looked directly into the main studio camera. The words she delivered next disrupted the entire comedic atmosphere of the room. She stated that there is a profound difference between inheriting a historic platform and exploiting it for corporate entertainment revenue. She did not mention a name initially, but the reference was clear. She spoke about the recent trend of high-profile figures trading generational public duty for short-term media visibility in the United States. The pop star on the sofa stopped laughing mid-smile and stared down at her lap. The technical facts of the broadcast outlined the immediate chaos behind the scenes. In the control room, the executive producer reached for the audio slider, uncertain if the monologue would violate the network's strict guidelines on political neutrality. The show is recorded with a 2-hour tape delay before it airs to the public. This delay usually allows the editing team to remove accidental swearing or technical errors. But the production team stood frozen as Mirren continued her assessment. Mirren spoke for exactly 90 seconds without interruption. She compared the concepts of quiet, lifelong service with the loud, repetitive nature of modern celebrity culture. She pointed out that true royalty derives its power from restraint, not from constant public explanations. Her delivery was calm, deliberate, and entirely devoid of theatrical anger. That calm delivery made the critique feel devastatingly heavy. The microphone picked up the distinct sound of a camera operator shifting their boots on the concrete floor. The tension in the studio became a physical presence. The live audience, consisting of 600 people, stopped reacting entirely. There were no murmurs, no gasps, and no scattered applause. The silence was absolute. Graham Norton's hands remained perfectly still over his cue cards. He is a seasoned broadcaster who has handled hundreds of unpredictable celebrity moments over 3 decades. Yet, his signature quick-witted banter completely vanished as he waited for the actress to finish her thought. The mystery of why an acclaimed Hollywood actress would choose a late-night talk show to launch such a direct critique began to unfold through her own words. Mirren referenced a specific conversation she had with a veteran palace courtier during a charity gala in London several years ago. The courtier had explained that the biggest threat to the crown was not political opposition or public indifference. The biggest threat was the temptation for family members to view themselves as independent entertainment brands. This memory clearly fueled her perspective on the current royal landscape. She stated that when a person strips away the dignity of the institution to sell a personalized narrative, they lose the right to complain about the loss of their privacy. The critique struck at the very core of Prince Harry's public identity. For years, the Duke of Sussex has framed his media projects as essential efforts to tell his own truth. Mirren reframed those same projects as a basic commercial transaction. The facts regarding public reaction to the monologue emerged long before the episode actually aired on television. 2 audience members sitting in the 3rd row used their smartwatches to send text messages to journalists outside the building. Within 20 minutes of the recording session ending, the phrases Helen Mirren and Graham Norton were trending heavily on social media platforms across the United Kingdom. Royal correspondents began scrambling to verify if the BBC would actually allow the footage to remain in the final broadcast. The network faced an immediate dilemma. Removing the segment would look like corporate censorship, which would invite even more intense public scrutiny. Leaving the segment intact would guarantee a massive wave of complaints from supporters of the Sussexes. The head of programming spent an hour on a secure phone call with the legal department, while the technicians waited in the editing suite. The decision was finalized at midnight. The segment would air completely uncut. The broadcast data from that night shows an unprecedented spike in viewership. When the clock struck 10:30, millions of viewers tuned in specifically to see the red sofa moment. The footage showed the exact moment the American comedian next to Mirren nervously shifted his weight and took a sip of his drink. The contrast between the standard late-night entertainment format and the gravity of Mirren's words was stark. This moment opens a much larger question about the future of Harry's standing in the creative industries. For the past few years, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have relied on the protection and endorsement of top-tier entertainment figures to validate their new lives in California. They have attended major industry events and signed massive production deals. But Mirren is a foundational pillar of that world. Her public rejection of their strategy indicates a massive shift in how the elite tier of the entertainment industry views the royal expatriates. The first section of the recording ended with Norton quickly turning to his other guest to ask a completely unrelated question about an upcoming action movie. The transition was clunky and awkward, completely breaking the smooth rhythm the show is famous for. The audience offered a polite, strained round of applause, but the energy in the room had permanently shifted. The iconic actress had delivered a masterclass in public condemnation, and the reverberations were already traveling across the Atlantic. The Hollywood icon who knows the real crown. Helen Mirren walked into the green room behind the main stage exactly 2 hours before the cameras started rolling. She sat in a small leather armchair, reviewing a list of pre-approved talking points provided by her film studio's public relations agent. The agent had crossed out several topics with a black marker, specifically warning her to avoid any commentary regarding current British political debates or international conflicts. The document said nothing about the Duke of Sussex. Mirren tossed the paper onto a side table, picked up a pen, and began writing her own notes on the back of a script treatment. The legal and historical facts regarding Mirren's ties to the monarchy explain why her words carry such immense weight. In 2003, she was officially appointed a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire for her services to drama. This honor was not a generic Hollywood achievement. It required the direct, personal approval of Queen Elizabeth. 3 years later, Mirren spent months working with private royal biographers to prepare for her starring role in the landmark film about the aftermath of Princess Diana's passing. During that preparation period, Mirren gained unprecedented access to the inner workings of the royal household. She spent hours studying archival footage of private family gatherings at Balmoral and Sandringham. She learned how the family communicated behind closed doors during moments of extreme national stress. That deep immersion gave her a profound respect for the concept of constitutional duty. She realized that the survival of the crown depends entirely on the family's willingness to absorb personal pain without demanding public validation. This historical context creates a stark contrast with Prince Harry's modern American media strategy. While Mirren spent her career celebrating the dignity of royal silence, Harry has built an entire business model around public disclosure. He has participated in multi-part documentary series, recorded hours of intimate podcast interviews, and published a detailed personal memoir. To a traditionalist like Mirren, this approach looks less like a quest for personal freedom and more like a systematic dismantling of a sacred family legacy for commercial gain. The tension over this ideological divide became visible during a private industry dinner in Los Angeles last winter. A group of prominent British actors and directors were discussing the impact of streaming platforms on modern cultural storytelling. A close associate of Prince Harry suggested that the Duke's production company was paving the way for a more relatable, authentic version of nobility. Mirren, who was sitting at the head of the table, reportedly challenged the assertion immediately. She argued that true nobility cannot be relatable because its entire purpose is to represent an enduring, elevated ideal. This background helps resolve the mystery of why she chose the Graham Norton platform to make her stance public. She knew that an official press statement would look too political and heavy-handed. It would invite a tedious back and forth between public relations teams. By delivering her critique live on a popular entertainment show, she ensured the message would land with maximum cultural impact. She used the very media landscape Harry relies on to dismantle his public narrative in front of millions of viewers. The immediate facts following her monologue confirmed that the entertainment elite is no longer unified in its support of the Sussexes. For years, major Hollywood figures stayed silent or offered generic praise for Harry's independence. They viewed his departure from London as a brave stance against an oppressive system. But Mirren's raw, unfiltered commentary has shattered that consensus. She has given other high-profile figures permission to openly question the validity of trading hereditary public service for corporate entertainment contracts. The executive producers of the broadcast spent the commercial break discussing how to handle the sudden shift in the show's tone. They realized that Mirren had completely hijacked the promotional schedule for her own movie. Yet, they also recognized that they were witnessing one of the most significant moments in the history of British television. The network's social media channels were already blowing up with thousands of comments per minute, proving that the actress had tapped into a deep, existing public exhaustion regarding the ongoing royal rift. As the crew prepared for the final segment of the evening, Mirren remained perfectly calm in her seat on the red sofa. She had delivered her assessment with the precise timing of a seasoned theater professional. She did not offer any apologies or clarifying remarks when the camera stopped rolling during the brief production pause. She had used her unique authority as Hollywood's definitive on-screen monarch to deliver a verdict that Buckingham Palace could never voice publicly, and the entertainment world was left to deal with the immediate, massive fallout. The 6 words that cut deeper than any tabloid. Helen Mirren reached for her glass of water on the small glass table next to the red sofa. She took a slow, deliberate sip while Graham Norton adjusted his jacket. The studio audience remained locked in place, waiting for the conversation to shift back to her film project. Instead, Mirren set the glass down with a sharp click against the glass surface. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, and delivered the specific phrase that would dominate the next day's front pages. She called Harry's public output a disposable reality performance. The factual breakdown of those 6 words reveals why they caused such an immediate stir among language experts and royal commentators. Mirren did not use standard tabloid insults like traitor or royal rebel. She chose terms rooted in the mechanics of modern entertainment. By using the word disposable, she stripped away the elite prestige that Harry and Meghan have spent years building around their California brand. She reframed their high-profile streaming deals not as prestigious historical documentation, but as fleeting, low-tier commercial entertainment designed for quick public consumption. The tension escalated immediately as Mirren broke down the exact mechanics of this transition. She argued that a hereditary title is meant to represent permanence, continuity, and an unbreakable link to national history. When a prince takes that title and attaches it to multi-million-dollar entertainment contracts, the nature of the position changes completely. It becomes a commodity that can be bought, sold, and eventually discarded by corporate executives when the viewing metrics begin to decline. The American comedian sitting next to her looked down at his shoes, entirely unsure of how to inject humor into the moment. The physical facts of Harry's financial arrangements lend incredible weight to this specific critique. Between 2020 and 2026, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex signed multiple commercial agreements with global entertainment giants. These contracts included massive production deals for documentaries, podcasts, and personal memoirs. The financial scale of these deals was staggering, often exceeding $100 million in total value. But Mirren's critique highlighted the hidden cost of that financial independence. To fulfill those contracts, Harry had to consistently provide intimate details about his family's private lives. This reality introduces a profound structural mystery into Harry's long-term public strategy. How can a royal figure maintain an aura of exclusive, historical authority when their daily livelihood depends on the same media production cycles as standard reality television stars. Mirren resolved this mystery by stating that the two concepts are fundamentally incompatible. You cannot demand the unique deference and security protections reserved for a head of state while simultaneously operating as a commercial content creator who must constantly generate viral moments to satisfy a corporate boardroom. The conversation then shifted to a specific historical analogy that caught the palace press corps completely by surprise. Mirren referenced the Duke of Windsor, King Edward VIII, who abdicated the British throne in 1936 to marry Wallis Simpson. Following his departure from London, the former king spent decades living in exile in France, occasionally writing books and participating in magazine interviews to fund his lavish lifestyle. Mirren pointed out that despite his deep personal grievances with Buckingham Palace, the Duke of Windsor never attempted to turn his personal complaints into a repetitive, multi-part commercial streaming franchise. This historical comparison injected a massive wave of fresh tension into the studio. The comparison made it clear that Harry's current path is unprecedented even within the complex history of royal exiles. Previous generations understood that once you walk away from the functional responsibilities of the crown, your right to use the institution's symbolic authority to generate personal wealth is permanently revoked. Harry's attempt to create a hybrid model, where he retains his royal prestige while operating with the total freedom of an American celebrity, is precisely what Mirren labeled a performance. The legal facts surrounding the broadcast began to catch up with the production team during the final minutes of the segment. The network's compliance officers were reviewing the live feed to ensure Mirren's commentary did not violate any specific terms of the royal charter that governs the BBC's funding. The charter requires the network to remain entirely independent of political influence and personal vendettas. However, the legal team quickly determined that because Mirren was expressing a personal opinion about public figures who operate in the commercial sphere, her words did not constitute a breach of any media laws. The mystery now turns to the long-term impact of this public reprimand on Harry's future corporate negotiations. For the past year, Hollywood insiders have quietly whispered about the diminishing returns of the Sussex brand. Several major production companies have chosen not to renew their initial development deals, citing a lack of viable content beyond the core royal family drama. Mirren's public intervention has essentially validated those private corporate doubts, signaling to the wider entertainment industry that the Duke's narrative is no longer viewed as elite, prestigious content. The segment concluded with Mirren sitting perfectly upright, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She had delivered her assessment with the cold, undeniable precision of an actress who has spent a lifetime mastering the art of the dramatic monologue. She did not raise her voice once. She did not use hyperbolic language, and she did not look to the host for approval. She simply stated her conclusion with absolute conviction, leaving the production crew to scramble as the studio lights faded to black for the final commercial break of the night. Why the Graham Norton audience refused to laugh. The wide-angle studio lens panned across the 600 studio seats inside the BBC television center, capturing rows of viewers sitting in complete silence. Typically, this late-night talk show relies on a rapid-fire sequence of comedic sound effects, loud cheers, and spontaneous laughter from the crowd. The warm-up comedian had spent 45 minutes before the taping, ensuring that the crowd was energized and ready to react to the slightest hint of humor. But the sudden weight of the monologue broke that familiar entertainment rhythm entirely. A close-up shot showed a woman in the second row lowering her phone, her eyes wide as she looked over at her companion. The ambient chatter that usually fills the gaps between celebrity anecdotes had completely vanished, replaced by a heavy stillness under the hot studio lights. The immediate reality inside the room was a far cry from the standard British television taping. On the famous curved red sofa, the other celebrity guests looked physically paralyzed by the sudden shift in tone. The American comedian sat completely frozen, his knuckles turning white as his fingers tightly gripped his crystal water glass, while he stared intently at the studio floor. He had spent the first 10 minutes of the show launching into rehearsed routines about British weather and London traffic, but his comedic timing was entirely useless in the face of a raw cultural critique. Next to him, the pop star nervously adjusted the sleeve of her designer silk dress, completely refusing to make eye contact with the main camera or the host. She had been booked to project an image of youthful, carefree energy, but her posture collapsed into a defensive stance as the gravity of the moment settled over the stage. The public reaction data across the United Kingdom explains why the studio audience responded with such intense, frozen caution. For years, the British public has experienced a growing sense of exhaustion regarding the transatlantic royal feud. Comprehensive public opinion polls conducted across major metropolitan areas like London and Manchester show a distinct trajectory in viewer sentiment. While audiences initially felt immense sympathy for the couple's personal struggles during their initial departure, that sympathy sharply declined once the private disputes were turned into highly calculated entertainment products. The audience inside the studio perfectly mirrored that broader national mood. They were not reacting with outward anger or theatrical gasps. They were simply tired of the repetitive nature of the drama, and hearing it addressed so bluntly by a respected cultural icon left them entirely unable to find a reason to smile. This chilling atmosphere created an immediate technical dilemma for the production crew standing behind the high-definition studio cameras. The show's veteran floor manager stood just outside the main light pool, looking over at the elevated control booth, where the executive producers were huddled around the monitor banks. Usually, during a late-night talk show, the floor manager uses hand gestures or a digital cue system to trigger the standard illuminated applause sign to break any awkward pauses and keep the energy high for the home viewers. No signal came from the booth. The producers realized that forcing a fake, produced reaction from the live crowd would look incredibly dishonest on screen, especially given the historical weight of the statement that had just been delivered. The cameras simply kept rolling, capturing the raw, unedited awkwardness of the moment, without any television magic to smooth over the edges. The structural reality of the show introduces an interesting administrative mystery regarding the show's musical guest. A popular indie rock band had been positioned on the secondary stage opposite the couch, their instruments tuned and ready for a live performance scheduled for 10:45 p.m. The performance was supposed to take place immediately following the conclusion of Mirren's interview segment to lift the energy of the broadcast before the final credits. However, the emotional energy in the studio had dropped so significantly that the stage managers had to delay the musical introduction by 5 full minutes. The lead singer stood holding his electric guitar, whispering nervously to the bass player while the technicians scrambled to reset the lighting cues and allow the stagehands to quietly clear the empty glasses from the guests' tables. The standard promotional flow of British television had been completely derailed by a single, unscripted observation. The host tried his absolute best to rescue the comedic tone of the episode before the final commercial break. He forced a wide, theatrical smile, adjusted his characteristic colorful suit jacket, and looked out at the silent rows of the audience. He made a quick, self-deprecating joke about how he usually prefers to stick to shallow gossip about Hollywood divorces rather than deep constitutional debates. The audience offered a polite, incredibly strained round of applause that died out within 3 seconds. The collective energy in the room never truly recovered from the shock of the critique. The viewers remained focused entirely on the actress, who sat with her hands resting quietly on her knees, looking entirely unbothered by the sudden social tension she had created in the room. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the visible panic of the production staff whispering into their headsets along the perimeter of the stage. The segment finally concluded with the traditional studio credits rolling across the bottom of the screen, while the house band played its signature upbeat jazz theme song. But the usual sight of the celebrity guests laughing, hugging, and chatting with each other as the cameras pull back was completely missing from the final feed. The footage caught the host standing up to shake hands, but the interaction was brief, formal, and entirely lacking in the warmth that usually defines the end of a successful recording session. The other guests stood up quickly, wrapping their arms around themselves as if the temperature in the studio had dropped. The iconic actress had completely rewritten the rules of late-night variety television, and the production team was left to clean up the wreckage of a standard promotional tour that had transformed into a historic cultural event. The fallout from those few minutes of television began expanding into the digital sphere before the studio audience had even cleared the exit doors of the building. By 11 o'clock p.m., several major British media outlets had already published breaking news alerts on their mobile applications, using descriptions provided by eyewitnesses who had smuggled information out of the taping. The public discussion was no longer about the movie Mirren was supposed to be promoting. The discussion was entirely centered on the fact that Hollywood's most respected interpreter of royalty had openly broken the industry's unwritten rule of silence regarding the Duke of Sussex. The silence inside the studio had transformed into a deafening roar of public debate across the country, proving that the red sofa had just hosted one of the most volatile moments in the modern history of the network, the fallout reaching from London to Montecito. The morning sun rose over the manicured hedges of the Montecito mansion at 6 o'clock sharp, hitting the glass panels of the private office where Prince Harry's American public relations team was already gathering for an emergency briefing. It was Friday morning in California, just hours after the BBC broadcast had finished airing in the United Kingdom. On the main desk sat a silver Apple laptop displaying a live spreadsheet of digital media metrics, search volume keywords, and incoming press inquiries from major global news desks. The standard morning routine of drafting charitable press releases and scheduling lifestyle brand updates was completely abandoned. The team was facing a structural public relations crisis that could not be solved by issuing a generic, defensive statement to the media. The technical facts of the immediate media fallout outline a massive shift in public perception that traditional crisis management firms were entirely unprepared to handle. Within 90 minutes of the show's conclusion, the video clip of Helen Mirren's monologue had accumulated over 5 million views across multiple social media platforms, including TikTok and X. The clip was not being shared by standard anti-Sussex tabloid accounts, but by mainstream cultural commentators, film critics, and industry executives who found the actress's precise vocabulary fascinating. The data engineers tracking the viral trajectory noted that the engagement rate was highest among affluent, educated demographics in major urban centers like New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, the exact audience the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have spent 3 years targeting for their premium content ventures. The tension within the California household escalated as the team reviewed the specific commercial vulnerabilities exposed by the broadcast. Harry and Meghan's lifestyle and media empire relies entirely on maintaining a high-tier, premium brand status that justifies their multi-million-dollar production contracts with global streaming networks. When a prominent, Oscar-winning actress openly classifies that output as a low-tier reality performance on a public platform, it directly undermines the commercial value of their upcoming projects. A senior branding expert sitting at the table pointed out that corporate executives in Hollywood are notoriously sensitive to shifts in elite industry consensus. If the creative community begins to view the Sussex brand as cheap or transactional, the likelihood of securing future high-value development deals drops to zero. The crisis quickly spread across the Atlantic to the administrative offices inside Buckingham Palace, where senior courtiers were arriving for their daily operational briefings. The King's communications secretary walked into the private library holding a red leather folder containing the early morning press summaries from the national newspapers. Every single front-page headline in Fleet Street was focused on the Graham Norton segment, using bold black lettering to dissect Mirren's 6-word critique. Yet, the mood inside the palace was not one of celebration or triumph. It was a feeling of deep, analytical caution. The palace legal team immediately issued a strict directive to all household staff members, commanding absolute silence regarding the television appearance. The Crown understood that any official comment from the palace would only prolong the media cycle and risk making the king look petty or vindictive. This administrative reality introduces a fascinating mystery regarding the private communications that occurred between London and California during those frantic early hours. A prominent royal biographer discovered that a senior member of the king's personal staff sent a private text message to a trusted intermediary in California at 8 a.m. London time. The message did not contain any warnings or demands. It was a simple, operational confirmation that the palace had played absolutely no role in scripting or encouraging Mirren's remarks. The palace wanted to ensure that Harry's team did not attempt to launch a retaliatory media campaign, accusing the royal household of orchestrating a coordinated Hollywood smear campaign against them. The mystery was resolved when Harry's legal representative sent a brief, one-word acknowledgement back, signaling that they understood the independence of the actress's stance. The fallout also created a massive wave of disruption within the talent management agencies representing the couple in California. The agents spent the afternoon on secure phone calls with corporate sponsors and television executives who were reviewing the timeline for Harry's upcoming international promotional tour. A major American television network had been in the final stages of negotiating an exclusive, primetime interview with the Duke to promote his new global polo documentary series. Following the viral explosion of the Graham Norton clip, the network's executive vice president requested an immediate freeze on the contract negotiations. The network wanted to see if the public backlash would stabilize before committing millions of dollars to a promotional campaign that could be completely overshadowed by the actress's blistering critique. The physical reality of the damage became undeniable when Harry's communications team was forced to make a drastic logistical decision at noon California time. The Duke had been scheduled to participate in a live, interactive morning radio interview with a prominent station in Sydney, Australia, to discuss his ongoing charitable work with the Invictus Games. The interview had been locked into the schedule for 3 weeks, and Australian sports journalists were already prepared to go live on the air. Fearing that the radio host would inevitably pivot the conversation to address the Helen Mirren roast, Harry's team abruptly canceled the appearance with just 45 minutes of notice. The sudden cancellation left the Australian production staff furious, creating a secondary wave of negative press coverage across the Commonwealth. The long-term resolution of this crisis depends on how the Sussexes choose to restructure their public narrative over the coming months. Mirren's public intervention has essentially stripped away the unique protection that Hollywood's celebrity status usually provides. For years, the couple operated under the assumption that they could control their own story by bypassing the traditional royal press pack and working exclusively with friendly American media elites. But when a foundational pillar of that very entertainment elite stands up on British television and delivers a calm, devastating verdict of commercial exploitation, that protective shield is shattered. The quiet prince who wanted to build an independent media empire in the Sun is left facing a cold, unavoidable truth. When the world's most respected storytellers stop protecting your narrative, your control over the story is permanently broken. The entertainment world just delivered its most brutal verdict on the royal rift. Dame Helen Mirren used her massive public platform to say exactly what many royal insiders have quietly whispered for years behind closed doors. This unforgettable late-night television moment marks a permanent shift in how the elite tier of Hollywood views the Duke of Sussex's commercial media choices.